You wake up one morning. Yesterday, you had enough money to buy a house, but today, even buying a loaf of bread is difficult. Your salary gets deposited, but it loses value before you can even withdraw it from the ATM. People no longer carry money in their wallets. They carry it in wheelbarrows. It sounds like a movie scene, doesn't it? But it isn't. This has happened many times. This is called hyperinflation, and it happens far more often than most people think. We often fall into the illusion that money is something reliable. You work, you save, you think you've secured your future. But what history tells us is this: money is not as solid as we think. And what hyperinflation destroys is not just money. It shakes states, tears families apart, and corrupts societies. Now come, let's take a look at a few countries that experience this process firsthand. 5 countries, 5 real devastations. And in every single one of them, the same question echoes in people's minds. How did this come to this point? Germany, 1923. The First World War has ended. Germany has been flattened. On top of that, with the Treaty of Versailles, it has been burdened with an enormous debt, 132 billion gold marks. This is a debt written not to be paid off, but almost to be passed down from generation to generation like an inheritance. What does the German government do? It does what comes to all of our minds. It prints money, a lot of money. At first it seems like things are under control, then prices start to rise. You wake up one morning and the bread you bought yesterday costs twice as much today. Then 3 times as much. Then things spiral out of control. By the end of 1923, a single loaf of bread reaches 200 billion marks. Money is now nothing more than a piece of paper. People burn money in stoves because firewood is more valuable. Banknotes become toys for children. The so-called middle class watches a lifetime of savings melt away within a few weeks. But the real wreckage is not limited to money. Trust disappears. In a place where you cannot foresee tomorrow, the harshest solutions become the most attractive options. And thus, this environment of uncertainty prepares perfect ground for extremist ideas to take root. Hitler's rise onto the stage of history 10 years later is no coincidence. This deep trauma paves the road he walks to power. Zimbabwe, the 2000s. Years later, another continent, the same mistake. While President Robert Mugabe struggles with sanctions on one side, he launches major land reforms on the other. But the result is disastrous. Agriculture collapses, production stops. The economy is left gasping for air. The government's response is familiar: printing money. And that terrible cycle begins once again. By 2008, inflation reaches an unimaginable level, 79.6 billion%. Prices double every day. Unable to keep up with this speed, the government resorts to adding zeros to banknotes, first millions, then billions, and eventually $100 trillion notes. At some point, everyone realizes one thing: giving up is inevitable. In the end, the country switches to foreign currencies such as the US dollar and the South African rand. But this is not just a change of currency. The cost of this collapse is heavy. Pensions disappear. Industry is flattened. A generation is condemned to migration. When hyperinflation destroys everything, real wealth, land, skills, tangible assets, is the only thing left standing. Let's go a bit further back in time, to Hungary in 1946. This is the most severe case of hyperinflation in history. After the Second World War, the country's economy is in ruins, debt is high, resources are non-existent. To cope with war debts and fund reconstruction, the government uncontrollably prints the pengo. Things reach such a point that prices now double every 15 hours before the day even ends. Before us stands an inflation monster of 41.9 quintillion%, meaning a figure with 16 zeros behind it. Money melts so fast that the government issues mil pengo, worth 1 million pengo, followed by b pengo, worth 1 billion pengo. But none of these fancy names can stop the loss of value. In the finale, the pengo is abandoned and replaced by the forint, but the bill is very heavy. A vanished middle class and life savings wiped to zero. The state loses all credibility. That massive inflation devours not only money, but everything tied to the past. Venezuela, the 2000s and 10s. Sitting atop the world's richest oil reserves, this country collapses step by step under political ambitions and bad decisions. Corruption and irresponsible monetary policies drive the economy toward the cliff. To fill the empty coffers, the government presses the printing press button, and the expected end becomes inevitable. In 2018, inflation exceeds 1 million%. Imagine this: the moment you receive your salary, you have to rush to the market because the value of your money erodes within hours. When shelves empty, people start bartering, and doctors and engineers begin working as couriers abroad just to survive. Removing 6 zeros from the currency changes the signs, but it cannot stop the destruction. Hyperinflation cuts not only the economy, but the vital arteries of an entire society. The 1990s, Yugoslavia. As the Soviet bloc collapses and the country falls apart, the economy is crushed under war and sanctions. In 1993, inflation reaching 313 million% per month doubles prices every 1.4 days. Every new currency move made by the government to stabilize the system actually destroys the last pennies left in people's hands. To survive, people turn to the German mark or the US dollar. The devalued official currency is used to light cigarettes or to cover the windows of empty shops like paper. The scenario never changes. A crisis erupts. The government prints money. Trust disappears. Money dies. Society collapses. And history repeats itself over and over again with the same pain. And now, let's stop and think. It's easy to say those things are in the past. It's comforting to say we're smarter now. But are we really? Today we are living in the most indebted period in world history. The debt of the United States alone has exceeded $34 trillion. Over the past decade, central banks have printed trillions of dollars to keep the economy alive with artificial respiration. It worked for a while. Inflation was low, the system functioned, until the mask fell. In 2021 and 2022, everything changed. Those uncontrollably printed trillions combined with war and energy shocks, and inflation reappeared. Central banks switched from printing mode to panic mode. Interest rates soared, markets were shaken, and once again the price was paid by ordinary people whose rents rose and salaries melted away. There's no hyperinflation yet today, but the same patterns of thinking exist. The dangerous belief that printing money can solve every problem and that we can borrow endlessly. Exactly what was done in Germany, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. With one difference: scale. Never before has the global economy been this interconnected and debt-based. If trust breaks now, this collapse will not be limited to a single country. It will be systemic. And at this point, the subject ultimately comes back to you. Neither you nor I can stop the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, or massive markets. But you can control your own preparation, spending habits, and most importantly, your mindset. There are 3 things that these 5 great disasters we talked about scream at us. First, real wealth is not the pieces of paper in your pocket. Real wealth is your purchasing power. Your land, your ability to create something from scratch, the tangible values you can hold on to. While printed money disappears, only these remain standing. Second, trust is everything. Money does not lose value because the writing on it fades. It collapses the moment you stop believing in it. And once that bond of trust is broken, repairing it is almost impossible. Third, inflation punishes the unprepared. It is very fast and always sends the bill to the most vulnerable, those trying to make it to the end of the month on a salary. States may escape by melting their debts through inflation, but you cannot melt your grocery bills. That's why financial literacy is not just about getting rich. It's about protecting yourself and your family. Protection means understanding instead of blindly trusting the system, reducing debt burdens, acquiring skills that hold value under any condition, and not putting all your eggs in one basket. Remember, inflation is essentially a silent tax stolen from your pocket. Those great collapses in history were not coincidences. They were the result of war, arrogance, and the lie of money created out of nothing. Now you have seen this pattern. The next time someone comes to you and says, "That could never happen here," you have an answer. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it crushes those who fail to understand it. If what I've told you has given you a different perspective, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The answers are always hidden in history. I'm just showing you where to look.